We are broadcasting a webinar on transition management, which is basically the new onboarding portion of the GHR, Infor GHR solution. And with that, I give you Matt and Ashley.
Thank you, Keith. Hey, I'm Matt Slazak, obviously.
And I'm Ashley Rhodes.
So yeah, we're going to be talking through the transition management piece today of GHR. It's come a long way from where it used to be, so I think you'll be kind of impressed with some of the things that we're looking at today. So just a little bit about us, obviously. We are RPI, and when we get right down to it, let's dive straight into what we're going through. I think the slide jumped there for a moment, but let's talk about transition management itself. What is it? Who can use it? What can we do with it? And most importantly, why do you want it? In the old days, when we're looking at the old solution that was out there, when you were looking at like the Enwisen onboarding and preboarding, that was always a separate piece that you always had to interface things back and forth to. But nowadays, it's all integrated. So you're going to see that there's a lot of value in terms of what is delivered with the solution right out of the box and how you can really make it your own without having to have additional add-ons, additional pieces of software.
And I really think the best part of this is you no longer have to have a contract either. Mm-hmm. So there's no additional cost because it comes inside the system now.
Right. So it's all tightly integrated now, so it's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So let's start with that first question though. Like, what is this thing? Because when we talk about transition management, it's kind of a broad term and you're not necessarily sure what this really means. This really handles the preboarding, the onboarding, and the crossboarding. So anytime you have a change in somebody's employment or what they're doing, this is what we're talking about with it. It will handle that talent acquisition side of it from when we're going through and starting to bring somebody into the organization. That's our preboarding. Our onboarding is we've got that person hired, they're actually in, and maybe we need them to do some extra courses for to really get up to speed on their job, that kind of thing. So that's our onboarding piece. And then our crossboarding piece, something that really gets ignored a lot of times, a transfer internally. So if I'm going from one job to another, I've got fundamentally a different job right now. And the system, transition management right now, does handle the cross-boarding piece, where we actually can transition that person into another role within the organization. So now when we start to talk about how do we set up transition management? It's all really based around the transition program. Now there's no limit that I know of right now in transition management in terms of how many programs you can have. You could have one, you could have 50, you could have hundreds. Obviously, there's a word of caution on that. If you want to have 100 transition programs, you're going to have to do some really, really fancy footwork in terms of
lots of maintenance.
Yeah. So, not saying you can't do it. You can build some very nice complex programs. You can have multiple programs. Just be careful what you ask for on that one, because the system will give you a lot of that power, but you're going to have to really watch yourself when you're doing any kind of maintenance. So, but really, when we come down to it, the transition program itself is pretty straightforward in terms of how we set it up, and we'll take you through a lot of these pieces of it. It starts around the main page here where we're talking about the main details. What is it really for? We've got an email template. There are a ton of email templates that are in the system already, and you can build those out. Most people will go and customize it completely. So as soon as somebody enters into this transition program, and we'll talk about how somebody does go into these later on, they can get an email right away describing what they have to do and where they have to go to really start this transition program off. We've got a whole bunch of calculation methods, which we'll talk about. It gives people an idea of how long this transition program is going to take, when things are going to be due, etc. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then also we'll talk about these side tabs where we're talking about the tasks themselves that have to happen. This is a really nice, unique feature of the system, is that you've got the ability to assign things not only to the candidate or the resource who's transitioning, but also we can assign things to everybody inside the organization. We'll talk about that and where we build those tasks out and where we assign who's actually going to be doing these things. And then we've also got the restrict eligibility, which is where we start to talk about, you can have 50 programs, but the restrict eligibility is going to dictate who's actually going to be in it. So it's a pretty simple setup. There's just a lot of moving parts on it. So let's go through a couple of those things.
So the first one we have here is the task audiences. Who are we sending these programs to? We've got the candidate. So when the candidate, again, is going through that pre-boarding process, maybe you want them to be able to fill out a couple of forms. The administrative, maybe there's admin tasks around users, maybe there's users badge access, schedules that need to be set up, and then resources. So if you're transferring a resource, you can set up different options for them to go through as well. Maybe they need to train the person that's taking over their current position. These are the different kinds of audiences that you can assign to these programs.
Right. And the nice thing about this as well is the system does know and inherently allows you to have totally different forms and totally different views for all these things based on these audiences.
Yep.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Really something you can customize and make your own.
Yep. The different task types we have, so these are the tasks that you would set up in your program. So of course we've got our forms, if we're needing to create any forms out there that users need to read through, any instructions maybe you need them to sign off on, content, send an email and complete, so you can set the system up to automatically send an email once a task has been completed in the system to notify whoever the next user is. Maybe after this task is complete, the admin needs to know to start provisioning their access. And then we've got URLs. So the URLs are nice because a lot of times candidates, when they're doing their pre-boarding, they would get a pop-up that said, okay, go ahead and now go out and schedule your drug screening. Now you can actually embed that into the transition program, so it looks like it's a part of the program versus maybe I just got a random email and now it looks like somebody's sending me a virus. That's no longer the case. It can actually be built in. And then of course we've got the tax forms and the I-9 form integration as well. So those can be set up, and the candidates or resources can fill that information out during the pre-boarding or onboarding process.
So all of these tasks, when you get down to it, are going to be driven off of forms. All of the transition forms that are out there, you've got a lot that are delivered. Yeah. I don't even remember the count right now.
I couldn't either.
I think they rolled out like 10 or something like that at first, but
yeah.
Now I want to say it's pushing like a couple dozen or something. Yeah. I'm not sure. But they've got a lot of delivered content inside there. So if you want to do something like your EEO self-identification purposes for your candidates, that's already delivered. You don't even have to build that form yourself. It's something, we know what the government form looks like, and Infor has delivered that for us. So we don't even have to worry about setting that up ourselves. That being said, as with almost everything, and I'm sure you've seen many of our webinars where we talk about this, almost everything in this system is configurable, and we can create user-defined content. This actually is relatively new, even in transition management. The first iteration of transition management did not allow user-defined content, but nowadays we can actually set that up ourselves as well. So if there is a specific need for specific information, user fields, things like that you need to create, you're able to invoke those user fields on a user-defined form, and you can have your candidates or resources go in and fill that out for automatically. So that paper form that you might be slipping the candidate when they come through the door, hopefully we can get rid of that and we can just collect the data and have it right up front. Eliminate your keying errors, things like that. I always say the nice thing about this is we're shifting a lot of the responsibilities over to your candidates or over to your resources. It's their data. Let them be able to see it, let them be able to manipulate it, and make sure that it's correct. They're going to be able to see it and make sure it's good. I-9 and state taxation. So there's a big asterisk that comes with this one. There is some I-9 information that's already in the system.
Yes.
There's some taxation that you can do, whether through user fields, etc. But here's the big asterisk. If you want to have the full integration with this, if you wanted to have something like an E-Verify take place with your I-9s, or you want to do your state taxation and have that imported, that's where you're looking at a couple add-ons. So Infor has partnered with Tracker I-9 to do that I-9 integration and really go through the E-Verify portions. Same with state taxation. There's another third-party software called Symmetry, which Infor is integrating with and can take care of your state taxation, and then we can get it back into the system. So some of the forms are there, but we still need to do some manipulation with some of that data. Nothing too daunting, but just be aware of that piece.
So initiating actions. If you are not using the candidate or the new hiring workflow, this is gonna be a little different for you. The initiating action can either be set up to trigger off of the hiring workflow, or it can actually be set up on the actual program itself. So whether it's the hire action that initiates this program, whether it's a transfer that initiates this action, we've got promote. All of the other different actions inside the system allow the program to be triggered. And again, if you're using the hiring workflow, one of the great things about that is now as soon as somebody gets to your workflow step, the system sends it immediately. So the great feature about that is a candidate accepts an offer over the weekend. You no longer have to wait until you get in the following Monday to send that program. The program can instantly send it from the system. So come Monday, you've had the offer accepted and you have all of their pre-boarding completed.
Right. And if you're not using the new configurable workflow, and if you're interested in the new version of configurable workflow for talent acquisition, that's our 3 o'clock presentation, so check that one out. That's the really cool new stuff.
Yes.
But if you're still using the older version, which is that still includes transition management, there are some of those actions that can also be triggered based on a candidate's actions. It sounds like we're hedging a lot on this, but there are different versions, and each version is going to have a little bit of a different functionality on it.
It's just slightly different.
Right,
yeah.
right. So there's going to be some things we can kind of slide in there right away, and some that we have to do some manipulation on. So talked about when we were talking about the tasks themselves, about that whole scheduling piece. We do have a lot of date options that are out there. Out of the box, there are a few dates that are tracked with any transition task within your transition programs. Obviously, the assignment date, that makes a lot of sense. This is when the person was first assigned this task. But it also will start to track your due dates and even your at-risk dates. So we're able to say that, let's just say that this task is going to be due on the day of the person's hire. So they're going to walk through the door. We need that transition task taken care of before they walk through the door. So our due date is going to be their start date. But we can also say, all right, well, let's say 3 days before that start date, we're going to say that this is at risk. We could set it to be a week before the start date, something like that, and really start to pound this person with emails and reminders and, just annoy them until they actually do some of these things. They're all email templatized. I think I might have created a new word on that. I'm not sure.
I think you did.
Yeah, so it's now a verb, and I'm going to copyright it now.
You should.
They're templatized, so you can actually go through and trigger certain emails based on these dates. The calculation methods themselves, in terms of what dates are out there for people, there are a ton that they delivered out of the box.
This is an example of how many there
right. And this is actually
cut off.
This is cut off and it goes on to another page.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that are already out there. So I know you can't really see it on the webinar itself on the screen, but we've got this set up to be 6 days before the hire date, or 3 days before the employment date, or 60 days after the start date. So this is where we talk about the differences between the pre-boarding versus the onboarding. Mm-hmm. Pre-boarding is before they're through the door. Onboarding, they're one of yours, but they still have to do some things before we officially say that they're complete with their transition programs.
Well, and this is actually quite an improvement over the original transition management, because it didn't allow that prior to send all of these emails out constantly.
Right. And it's not something where we'll show you an administrative dashboard later on, but you don't have to sit there and monitor this constantly. The system is going to be doing these calculations and sending these emails out itself. So it's not somebody who's sitting in a back room just waiting for that date and send that email. So that's already built in. So there's a ton of these delivered calculation methods within the system. Again, as with everything else we're talking about, you got that little create button right there. So if you have a custom calculation and you need that to be a user-defined parameter, you can absolutely do that. Totally allowed within transition management. So when we talk about this, it comes to that next question on that first slide. Who can actually use this? So there are a lot of options on this.
There are quite a few. Yeah.
So obviously candidates out of the box makes a lot of sense, especially when we're talking talent acquisition purposes. We're going to want our candidates to go in and start to do things. Kind of a corollary to that is we've also got our recruiters. The recruiters do actually have a view into that candidate's record to see how they're progressing on that new hire. Yep. If they're supposed to be doing these 12 tasks and they haven't done them yet, the recruiter can actually see that. So that's a nice little function inside there.
So we've also got managers. Managers also have a dashboard for transition management to be able to see who's completed their transition tasks. And task groups. So really you can create, and I believe these are the delivered ones here that we've got showing on the screen, but you can really create as many task groups as you want and assign who needs to be a part of them as well.
Right, right. So the nice thing is not only can all these people have a view of how people are progressing through the system, but they can also have tasks assigned to them themselves.
Yes.
So if we need the manager to do something, as opposed to just monitor how this transition program is going, they can actually have some tasks and they'll see that called out for them. Mm-hmm. With the task groups, you can also see, again, we can create our own. We can do as many as we want to. And then we can actually assign specific resources to those, where when we're looking at a candidate or recruiter or a manager, those are obviously very specific people, and that's really going to one person. These task groups, though, allow us to send it to basically a pooled in basket. So everybody who might work for information systems, they can all have view into this in basket and say, okay, well, we know that we have to order a computer people or start to get their Active Directory set up, things like that. So you've got a few options within here. So what can this thing actually do? Let's actually start to go through and talk about preboarding here. So preboarding is just what it sounds like. We've gone through the talent acquisition program and we've said that, yes, this person is going to be hired. And they've gone through and they've accepted the offer and we know that they're going to come on board. So as soon as we either have that configured in the hire workflow or through the older version based on me approving that offer, however we have it set up, this is going to be sent directly to the candidate. It's going to use their candidate space credentials as well. So what's going to happen is whatever they had as their email, as their primary contact within talent acquisition, they're going to receive an email directly. And you can have attachments on here as well to say, all right, well, here's a whole bunch of documentation I want you to have. But then there's going to be a link inside here. And you can kind of see it inside here. It says, okay, click here, and it's going to take them over to the transition management dashboard for the candidates. Again, their credentials are already set up. Mm-hmm. Transition management has absorbed that from talent acquisition, so they don't have to remember a separate login or anything like that. And the big key thing I think that we can't stress enough is this is automatic. So that candidate who accepted something on Saturday night, they're going to get this email almost immediately. So give it a few minutes, it probably won't pop up, but you don't have to wait for the recruiter to come back in and see that this person approved their offer or anything. Right. It's happening. They can start to work on that stuff immediately.
So this is the candidate view, and this is actually a standard delivered program from Infor. And what it is the candidate, again, they log in using their same credentials that they created on the candidate space. And this has actually been just most recently mobile optimized as well, so candidates can now do the process via their phone. So maybe they accept the offer and they have to hurry up and run out and they've got to pick up their kid, they're waiting in line, they can go ahead and finish their pre-boarding process while they're in line waiting for their daughter or son to get out of school, which is pretty neat, because that functionality didn't exist. I don't even think it existed in Wizen, if I'm recalling correctly. So, and that was just recently rolled out. So this is the pre-boarding, and you can see at the top it's going to list the activities or the type of activities that they have, and out of the box. And again, all of these can be edited to fit your needs. But out of the box, we've got their personal information form, their disability form, EEO, veteran self-identification form, a dress code policy. So maybe they need to sign off saying they've reviewed the dress code policy. You can edit that one out there and put whatever you need in. And then to schedule the drug test. So again, that's kind of going back to earlier when we were discussing the different types of tasks that you could put out there. This is a URL one. And again, it really puts the URL inside of the screen here, so it looks like it's a part of that program. So they're not having to get an email from another system, click into another system to get to that point to schedule the drug test. It would just be inside of this one. So
Right. It's fully integrated there, so you don't have to worry about that. So.
Yes, which is nice.
So, talking about pre-boarding activities, what do we commonly see? And you'll see that, the things that we just talked about, the contact information verification, how often do people put in their address the wrong way or type their phone number wrong, something like that.
Happens.
Never.
No.
And the nice thing also with that contact verification, with some of the things that we'll talk about during our configuration console webinars as well, we can actually force you to always have a specific format. We can do that nowadays. And we can just invoke those right inside Transition Management. Your self-IDs, your social security number, for example. If you don't want to ask that as part of your talent acquisition program, you can have it in your transition program so that you're still getting that information, but it's not as kind of out there. Some people don't really like that as part of their talent acquisition program, but you can have it integrated inside here.
I think one of the great things is that e-signature, so you can also make sure that they're signing off that yes, we've reviewed this, or again, you can go with the classic checkbox if you'd rather do that.
Right.
But that's a neat option too, and the ability to also upload attachments at any stage. So if you're wanting to, maybe they've accepted the offer, and now you need to go through a background check, or you're verifying their certificates. Maybe you've taken off attachments on the candidate side because you don't want everybody and what's the term? Everybody and their mom loading up attachments into the system. Well, the great thing about transition management is you can enable that feature here. So maybe you want a form for verifying their certifications for certain jobs in the system. Now you can have them upload their attachment at that time. That way, you're not getting an overflow of attachments at the time time of application.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most recruiters don't really like that if they've got 50 things to parse through. So, those are all a lot of things that we talk about on that candidate side. But the other thing that we can talk about is, tasks like this, where we're talking about ordering the computer or getting their network account or provisioning, or things like that. Badge access. Those are things that we can assign to an administrative group and give that to a specific task group. So again, it kind of cuts both ways. Not just a candidate, it's not just a resource thing. It can be anybody in the organization that you need to have access to it.
Yep. So the onboarding forms, this is kind of an administrator view of the onboarding, and you can see here, well, you might be able to see here, it's probably a little small, but what it does is it shows you your transition program and the people that you have currently assigned to it. And it also will flag to let you know the due date. It flags it with a red mark saying that these people are way past due and they haven't finished their transition management. So, and you can also see, again, so we see listed here the tasks. So we have a list of resource tasks versus administrative tasks. So you can actually see the breakdown of who has completed what in the system. And if you click into that, it'll actually give you even further breakdown of what's been completed, who signed off on it, when it was signed off, and you can actually see the signatures and everything inside the system.
Right.
Some of the common activities for onboarding are taxes. Again, slight caveat with that, you need to have the integration for it.
For the state.
For the state.
Yes.
State taxes. And then the direct deposit, confirming that an employee started. Position description sign off, so maybe you want them to read through it, make sure they fully understand what they're signing up for, and you want that electronic signature. Department tour, so maybe you want to sign off whenever they've completed their tour of the department or the floor that they need to be very
Familiar with.
Thank you. Benefits enrollment, you can go ahead and have that kick off as well. And was that welcome luncheon?
Yes. So this is the best example that Infor has ever given, and everybody laughs at that.
I don't know
Ashley.
why. It's
So,
just...
yeah. So this person is brand new to the organization. We want the manager to go and take them out to lunch.
I think I had a welcome luncheon actually, if I'm recalling correctly.
I don't think I did. So
Oh well.
we didn't have transition management
we didn't
at
have
that
the
time.
checklist.
So,
Yeah, we got to get that set up now.
Yes. So right there, you can see that you can standardize your transition program for your entire organization. So it's really limitless. That's really what we're talking about. There are some things delivered, but don't just think along those lines of just a resource or just a candidate.
Yes.
It can be managers. It can be anybody. Crossboarding. Okay, so again, this is something that a lot of times, I know, when I worked in HR for, all those years, it was something that, I think every organization struggles with. I know we did, and every client I think we've ever worked with has the same kind of problems. So I'm being promoted, I'm transferring to another department, I'm, doing any of these things that is just common HR work. A lot of times we don't catch up with that employee and really make sure that they understand what they're going into. So we had that department tour and that welcome luncheon way back when they started, but now I'm on a new floor or I'm in a new building and I need to know where all the supplies are. It's something that we're really good at doing that. Most organizations are really good at doing that for new employees. But when we're just moving somebody around, we kind of lose sight of that. Transition management is going to allow us to actually have that view and allow them to actually, have these programs kicked off automatically just because I'm transferring, just because I'm being promoted. So things like that, our position sign off again. Notifying new managers about working restrictions. If they've got an ADA request and they can only stand for X amount of time, in theory that's come up. During the hiring process that this person has been told that that's part of the physical requirements of the job, but we might not necessarily know that as the new manager. They're not supposed to know that until the person actually works for them. Other things inside there, so.
Let's see, we've got the re-provisioning requests.
Oh, yes.
So requesting new access, maybe they need new security based on the role that they're taking. Maybe if you're using succession management and they've been promoted from, employee to manager, we now need to notify somebody in the IT group that they need manager access in the system and they need to be assigned properly. Job requisition request. So maybe now you've got an open position. Maybe that person left that position or was transferred to another position, and now you've got a vacancy. You can also have a job requisition request go out to the recruiter, maybe to let them know, or even the hiring manager. Cross training for replacement. I think this is the biggest one I've seen that's always missing, or it's not really well tracked. So everyone assumes that the employee has in fact cross trained or trained their replacement, and then Bob leaves, and guess what? Jim has no idea what he's doing.
Right.
Now you can get a sign off saying that, yes, Bob did indeed train this new replacement.
Right. Or even if they haven't trained them, at least document what you actually did.
Yes.
So, yeah, if you don't order supplies all of a sudden and you've got a backlog because only Bob knew how to do that, we're in trouble. So we want to avoid that. So one of the common questions that you might have is, well, what's actually the status of any of this? So we've got all these transition programs out there. Are people progressing through them? Are they actually doing the things that they're supposed to do? There are transition program dashboards that are out there. So this is a nice view of this. So if we look at this candidate, we can actually see exactly when did they start in the program. How far along are they? So you can see total tasks and remaining tasks overdue tasks. All of those things are presented right on this dashboard. So we can see very quickly and easily if this person is actually doing what they're supposed to do to get this program complete. To-do menus. So this is from a transition management program dashboard perspective. But if we have tasks that are assigned to the manager, if we have them assigned to any of those groups that we're talking about, or even things that are going to an HR generalist, these are all going to start to show up under their to-do menus. And we're going to see that, hey, I've got to verify the credentials for this person. So
I'm just having a vision of somebody looking at their to-do menu who's maybe been on vacation for the last week, and they've got a list of 20 different items to check off.
But and the nice thing about that is if we always have that to that one person, that's our best argument for this is why you want to send it to that in basket with a whole bunch of people accessing it. So, God forbid somebody actually takes a day off in any organization. So
that doesn't happen. That's not allowed.
We get paid time off? Really?
We got PTO.
Oh, wow. Cool.
We'll talk later.
Okay. Also, like I said, there is the recruiter view as well. So the recruiter is able to go in and keep track of their candidates, make sure that we're on pace to get these 50 new nurses in the door next Monday. The recruiters can go through and make sure that they're tracking along and everything's going to be ready.
And the recruiter view is really nice now if you take advantage of the newest recruiter view, because it's mobile optimized as well. So if they're in a hurry and they're out the door, they can go ahead and just scroll through and take a look at who's completed. Maybe Allison has still not completed all of her tasks. You can see that or see those overdues. And again, when they're overdue, they're getting bombarded with emails. So it's a really great program to get in place.
So again, 3 o'clock we'll be talking about that stuff too.
Yes.
So
sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
It's okay. So this is just another view where we looked at that at a glance a moment ago, where it gives that overview. But these are the actual tasks that have been assigned to this person. So again, we've got a couple ways to do the same kind of work. That's always the theme of GHR. It feels like there's 50 ways to get to the same piece of information.
Yes.
So we can always drill deeper and find out where things are actually sitting. That's the beauty of an integrated system. We can see all these things right up front.
Yeah, and you can actually, he jumped ahead on me.
I want
you
that.
can actually, from here, it's really nice because it gives it a really just a really good breakdown. You can see who it's assigned to. So maybe if it was assigned to a task group, so it was assigned to multiple people, at the very end here, it also break it out and show who actually completed the task, which is great for even just auditing purposes, making sure that everyone is actually out there and paying attention.
Yeah. If we always see that things are always being delayed, at employee health, for example, but only one person is ever signing off on it, and we've got 7 people in that task group, let's start to talk to those other 6 people and see why they're not moving things along.
Assign them a training program.
A little bit, yep. Some corrective actions, things like that. So, so that's really important. The other thing that I forgot to mention on this is you can, through all of these transition tasks, assign things as prerequisites. So even though we need to get your badge access, for example, if you haven't filled out your EEO information or done that initial preboarding information, you're not even allowed to get there yet. So we can always assign those prerequisites on these transition tasks.
Yep. So custom groups, what are they? Hopefully everybody here knows already if you've implemented GHR. Custom groups are used also in the transition management module. They're used to really control who gets the programs assigned to them. And you can limit it. So maybe you have certain preboarding options, internal versus external. You can limit the view by restricting that eligibility based on the candidate type. Again, resources, maybe you have certain programs by the position that they're going into or the job that they're going into. You can restrict that eligibility down from there, making sure that they meet those qualifications. So really the custom groups are just a great way to put in kind of like an extra layer of security to make sure that you're assigning the correct program to the correct person. So you can't have say a recruiter go in and assign a program and then they go, oh wait, that's the wrong program. And what do? I've assigned the program and now they're getting emails from the system. Well, the great thing is even if they assigned it, as long as they don't meet the eligibility of it, it's still going to pop out and say no.
Right. And that's exactly what we were talking about before, where we could have 75 programs, but you're going to have to make sure that all those custom groups are working together and everybody is just in one of them, or 2, something like that. You're going to want to keep it low. So
Could you imagine 75 programs in the system though?
I could not. I think I've set up 4 total, like for one single client. So it's a possibility, but again, it's Frankenstein's monster. You can build it. Do you really want to?
Overthink it.
Exactly. But just like what we're talking about with our custom groups, if you had a certain group like physicians or something where you didn't want them to go and do that because they're going to log in immediately and do all of their transition tasks.
I mean, that's
all
how
the
it
time.
works all the time. And they also fill out applications.
Always. So, if there are certain groups that you need to exclude that way, or if there were certain actions, if you didn't want to do certain things, you've got a lot of control within these custom groups and within the transition programs themselves. So don't be afraid of them, even though it's a big automated monster that sits back there, it is easily controllable.
I think it's a fantastic automated monster.
It is. Don't be afraid of it. I'm sorry, but yeah. So it's got a lot of power behind it. Just, have to set it up the right way. Think through the programs that you've got. Think of your actual needs, and most of this can be handled in transition management. So, all right. So that's the end of the official part of the presentation. So I guess we'll open it up.
People a second here in case they got some questions they want to type in. Gotta type fast. Just kidding. No, obviously, if you wanna discuss this further, or explore it, Ashley and Matt are always happy to get on the phone, have a conversation, see if this might be a fit for you. Obviously, we expect that customers that have already deployed GHR would be looking to take advantage of this. It should be. They might have to get their system updated, right? Because these have been released in the last.
Yes, this is the latest
So,
version here.
yeah.
You have to be on 11 in order to take advantage
So there might be an
of it.
upgrade to 11 involved, which is a little bit more elaborate, but
Right.
But then obviously we feel like there's a lot of value. We're very excited about this.
And the one thing, just kind of to that point, I kind of glossed over this, but we talked a lot about the interplay with talent acquisition and things like that. If you don't have talent acquisition,
it works
you're
with
still able
global
to
HR
use,
too.
right,
Yes.
it's a global
Yes.
HR product. So you don't have to worry about, you have to have TA or anything like that.
And you really got to think kind of long term too. If you're having to contract with Enwisen or another company, think about the cost savings you
Right.
would get here by bringing it in house. And even with that upgrade, long term, you're going to save a bundle.
Right.
So.
And even, in those soft costs, that person who has to remember these are the 50 pieces of paper that somebody has to fill out,
Yes.
we can start to get that integrated right away.
Yep.
Save that person some time.